During this lesson, I'll explain the structure and content of the JSASIP, including building blocks, components, rubrics, and observables. The 10 building blocks form the basic architecture of the JSASIP. These 10 areas contain all the elements of the assessment tool, and I will explain each of them in the next set of lessons. For now, it's important to think of them as the major sections of the assessment tool. The building block contains all the components for its category. Then for each component, there is a rubric with 4 descriptors. Let's look at an example. The instruction building block includes components such as instructional goals, lesson planning, and instructional strategies. And each of these components has a rubric with 4 descriptors, from 4 for outstanding to 1 for unsatisfactory. Let's look at the instruction building block and its components. These include instructional goals, lesson planning, instructional strategies, technology integration, teacher engagement, student learning, derech eretz, or how people behave toward one another, instructional time, physical space, class size, inclusiveness, student assessment, and instructional media center. The components in their rubrics are presented on a grid like this one. The red line on the grid is a way of stressing that scores of 4 and 3 are considered satisfactory, while scores of 2 and 1 are considered unsatisfactory. There was a deliberate decision made to use 4 descriptors for the rubrics instead of 5. If there were 5 descriptors, there could be a temptation to give the middle score if assessors were unsure of whether to score a component as satisfactory or unsatisfactory. We advise that the first question assessors should ask when scoring a component is whether the score should be satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and then to make the determination of whether the score should be a 4 or a 3 or a 2 or a 1. For each component, there is an accompanying question to help the assessor understand the exact focus of the component. For I1, Classroom Instructional Goals, the question is, are classroom instructional goals clearly articulated and posted for each lesson? Each rubric defines a level of practice. For example, the 4, which is the gold standard, indicates that teachers, meaning virtually all teachers, articulate and post the goals and students are aware of them, while the 3 indicates that teachers only articulate them and students are aware of them. The 2 indicates that only some teachers develop goals and many are not clearly written or communicated to students. And the 1 indicates that teachers, meaning most teachers, do not set or consider instructional goals. The question for I2 on lesson planning is, do teachers carefully prepare lesson plans for each lesson? The 4 and the 3 assume that almost all teachers prepare written lessons, while the 2 indicates that only some prepare them, and the 1 assumes that virtually no teachers prepare written lessons. The 4 also takes into consideration that plans encompass a manageable amount of content for the time allotted. When scoring, it is expected that assessors will find few 4s because the JSASIP sets a high standard for this top score. It is also expected that there will be some 1s. At times, assessors may be reluctant to assign this low score, but it should be given when appropriate because it can be helpful for school leaders as they plan for improvement. To help assessors think about what they might look at or consider when scoring a component, the JSASIP provides observables. And to provide an example of them, let's look at component I13, student assessment. The question for this component is, does the school have a comprehensive assessment process? To help Here are some observables which may be helpful when deciding how to score this rubric. Observables can include documents, practices, and processes. They can form the basis of questions to be asked during interviews. I-13's observables include a list of documents plus a list that describes the processes a school could use to assess student learning. Finally, prior to setting out to do an assessment, it's important to know the components and rubrics for the building blocks to be assessed. This will help you develop questions and to know what you want to observe when you visit the school.